Picture a guy named Karl, 26 years old, sitting behind a desk at a textile company on Friedrichstrasse, right in the heart of Berlin. He's got a pen set, a wife named Anna who wraps him black bread and cold sausage every single morning, and a savings book tucked in his nightstand drawer next to his watch. He's not wealthy, he's not struggling. He's exactly what Germany spent 200 years engineering. A responsible, educated man with a steady job and a plan. January 1923. That savings book says 800 marks. Not a fortune, no, but 2 full years of scraping together whatever was left after rent, after groceries, after the tram fare. His father taught him to build that cushion, and he built it. 10 months later, those 800 marks couldn't buy a single postage stamp. Not a house, not a meal, a stamp. One stamp, and they couldn't even cover that. This is what happened in those 10 months. And here's what makes it terrifying. It didn't start with an explosion. Nobody panics until it's too late to panic. The mark had been bleeding value since the war. Karl knew it. Everybody knew it. A loaf of bread that ran you a quarter mark back in 1918, by 1922, that same loaf was 3 marks. Annoying, sure. The kind of thing you grumble about over dinner, then you adjust. You ask your boss for a little more money. He gives you something close. Life moves on. But what Karl didn't understand, what nobody in Berlin truly grasped until it was already swallowing them whole, was that this little number problem was about to jump the rails. It was about to leave the world of math and enter the world of fever dreams. January 1923. French and Belgian soldiers marched straight into the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial engine, its coal, its steel, because Berlin hadn't delivered its reparation payments. And the German government's response? Tell every worker in the region to drop their tools. Do nothing. Don't lift a finger for the occupiers. Oh, and don't worry about your paycheck. The state will cover it. How? By printing whatever money it needs. The math always wins. Always. And the math on this was catastrophic. For Karl, sitting at his desk a few hundred miles away, this felt like somebody else's problem, a political thing happening in a region he'd never even visited. What it meant for those 800 marks sitting in his nightstand? He wouldn't figure that out until spring. March rolls around. The bakery near Karl's apartment does something small but telling. They rip down the printed price tags and put up a chalkboard instead. Karl notices, doesn't think much of it. By May, that chalkboard gets updated twice a day. By June, Anna's sprinting to the market at dawn before Karl even leaves for work because a head of cabbage at noon costs more than it did at 8 in the morning. She doesn't panic. She adjusts. That's what you do. Right. But here's where something fundamental cracked. For Karl's entire life, money had been a thing you could set down and come back to, like a rock. You earned it, you stored it, you returned to it later, and the number was still the number. That's what a savings book meant, a fixed point in the universe. It waited for you. Summer of 1923, that fixed point started sliding. Karl's boss, decent guy, not heartless, started paying wages twice a day. Morning wages before lunch, afternoon wages before you caught the tram home. And this wasn't generosity, this was survival math. Because a paycheck you received Friday morning, noticeably smaller in value by Friday afternoon. By Monday, substantially worse. By the following Friday, nearly worthless. The only defense was velocity. Spend it the second it touches your hand. So Karl started running, literally running. Every morning when that first wage payment dropped, he'd bolt from his desk, grab his stack of paper marks from the cashier's window, and speed walk to the nearest shop. And he wasn't the only one. The streets filled with office workers in their nice clothes, moving with this controlled desperation. Everyone knew that every single minute between receiving money and spending it was costing them. A journalist named Friedrich Kroner watched all this in August, described the shopping lines as looking like a contagion. Women still wearing their kitchen dresses, faces patient but determined, inching forward. The city, he wrote, was being shopped empty. Again. Karl grabbed whatever his arms could carry. Rice if they had rice, noodles if they had noodles, soap, candles, anything with physical substance, anything that would still be worth something tomorrow, because paper marks Paper marks would not be worth something tomorrow. Savings are just promises, and promises expire. Now imagine waking up every single day knowing the price of bread you memorized yesterday is a lie. You don't know what the new number is. You'll find out when you get to the shop. And when you get there, the guy behind the counter tells you a figure that sounds made up, completely fictional, and you count out your marks and you pay it, because the alternative is not eating. A scholar named Victor Klemperer kept a diary through all of this. October 1923, he writes that the dollar now stands at 800 million marks. 800 million, and it's climbing 300 million higher every single day. Then he writes something that just guts you. How long will we still have something to eat? Where will we next have to tighten our belts?
That's what hyperinflation actually feels like from the inside. Not some dramatic Hollywood collapse, just this grinding, hourly arithmetic that quietly whispers to you, the world you were promised, the one where being careful and responsible and doing everything right actually meant something, that world is closed. Permanently. Carl got a raise in July, his second that year. By any pre-war standard, an enormous raise. Bought less than his January paycheck had bought in January. The textile firm actually hired a guy, a whole human being, whose only job was to sit at a desk and track the dollar exchange rate hour by hour so they could price invoices in real time. That was his entire job, watching a number change, writing it down, over and over. And Carl understood exactly what that man's existence meant. The company didn't trust its own currency to hold value for 60 minutes. The artist George Gross described what shopping looked like during those months. He said even pausing at a shop window had become a luxury you couldn't afford, because in the time it took to walk from the street through the door, a rabbit might jump 2 million marks in price. He carried his money in a knapsack. A knapsack. Because the stacks of paper needed to buy the smallest item wouldn't fit in your pockets anymore.
Carl didn't have a knapsack. He had a cloth bag that used to hold his lunch. By September, that bag was stuffed with paper money every morning. And the change, if there even was change, often wasn't worth picking up. Sometimes the money ran out before he reached the front of the line. Then you just went home with whatever you'd managed to grab, and you made it work. But wait, it gets worse. Carl's neighbor in the apartment building, a man named Heinrich, late 60s, retired civil servant, 30 years of loyal service to the city. He had a pension, a number fixed in a contract, paid monthly by the municipality. In 1918, that pension was comfortable. By 1921, it was tight but manageable if you were disciplined. By the summer of 1923, it wouldn't last the week. Heinrich wasn't careless. Heinrich wasn't stupid. He did every single thing a responsible German of his generation was supposed to do. Served his time, saved his money, retired with a government guarantee printed on official paper. But the guarantee was just a number, and the number had become noise. Carl and Anna started leaving food at Heinrich's door. A handful of rice, a piece of bread when they could spare it. Not because they had plenty, they absolutely did not, but because the alternative was lying in bed at night, knowing a man in his 60s was going hungry 10 feet away. His pension was supposed to protect him. His pension was protecting nothing.
And that's the thing people miss about 1923. Trust the system, they said. The system had other plans. This inflation didn't randomly strike unlucky people. It specifically, surgically destroyed the ones who had trusted the state's promises the most. The workers, the savers, the pensioners, the civil servants. Everyone who'd played by every rule, kept their savings books in their nightstand drawers, and believed the institutions would hold, those were the people it ate alive. Then the barter economy showed up. Didn't knock, didn't announce itself, just appeared. One day, Carl noticed the tobacconist down the street had stopped pricing cigarettes in marks entirely, wouldn't take paper money unless you forced the issue, but bread, He'd take bread. Soap? Gladly. A cigarette for a cigarette? Done. And if you insisted on paying in marks, he'd calculate the price at that specific hour's rate, which changed while you stood there arguing about it. Cigarettes became money, not because some authority declared them money, because they were small, portable, divisible, and, here's the crucial part, a cigarette today was still worth a cigarette tomorrow. A paper mark today was worth who knows what tomorrow. Probably less. Almost certainly less.
Anna kept a list in the kitchen. Things that hold value. Soap, candles, cigarettes, coffee, coal. Things that don't, everything else. That list was their survival manual. It told them what to grab the instant marks hit their hands and what to stockpile whenever they got the chance. Carl traded a week's worth of soap, painstakingly collected over 3 weeks of strategic buying, for a bag of potatoes that would feed them for 2 weeks. And afterward, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. The trade was real. Both sides walked away with something tangible. No numbers involved. No zeros. No hourly recalculations. Just soap for potatoes. The shops started closing early, or not opening at all. If you bought inventory at morning prices and sold at morning prices, you were losing money by lunch. The only logical move was to shut down, wait, restock at the new numbers, and try again tomorrow, if you could even find goods to restock with. By autumn, you could walk down entire Berlin streets and find nothing but iron shutters across every storefront. The shops that did open, no prices posted anywhere. You asked the clerk. The clerk told you a number. That number was valid for maybe that hour, maybe less. If you hesitated, the number changed while you were deciding. Klemperer called it the mad rush of having to shop, this specific, unique anxiety of knowing that waiting, any amount of waiting, was losing. And then he described what came after the stabilization, the aftermath, destitution. You couldn't buy anything at all because the rush had consumed everything you had. That was the trap. The middle class spent every last mark of their savings just trying to survive the fever. And when the fever finally broke, the savings were gone. November 15th, 1923, the Rentenmark arrives. Carl heard about it the way every Berliner did. Newspapers, bank lines, tram conversations. A new currency, backed not by gold, but by the land itself. Mortgages on German farms and factories. 1 Rentenmark equals 1 trillion paper marks. 12 zeros, deleted. Bam! The wheelbarrow prices, the billion-mark bread, the twice-daily sprints from paycheck to shop counter, all of it, over. Just like that. Carl stood in the bank the day they opened the exchange. 2 things in his pocket. The cloth bag of paper marks from that week, and his savings book. The one with 800 marks. 2 years of discipline. 2 years of setting aside whatever was left. The paper marks? Exchangeable. The savings book? Those 800 marks converted to a fraction of a single Rentenmark. A fraction.
He didn't shout, didn't argue, thanked the clerk, walked out. Anna was waiting on the corner. He showed her the new note, the Rentenmark, which was the size of a normal bill and had numbers on it that an actual human being could read without losing count of the zeros. She held it for a moment. Neither of them spoke. They walked to the bakery. Bread cost a fraction of the new mark. The baker wrapped it in paper, handed it over. Carl paid with actual coins, freshly minted, small, real. And he received change. Real change. A smaller coin that would still buy something tomorrow. They walked home with the bread. The math always wins. Always. And this time, the math had finally stopped punishing them. The newspapers called it the end of the nightmare. And technically, sure, prices froze. Chalkboards went back to printed tags. Morning pay was worth the same as evening pay. Carl could sit at his desk and do actual accounting without a man next to him watching the dollar rate like his life depended on it. But here's what stabilization actually meant for Carl and Anna. Savings? gone. Completely gone. Heinrich's pension? Restored, but to a brand new amount recalculated against the new currency. 3 decades of earned rights just reset, as if they'd never existed. And the textile firm Carl worked for? The firm survived beautifully. See, the company had debt, and hyperinflation had vaporized that debt in real terms. The company owned physical things, looms, fabric, warehouse space, things that held value while the currency dissolved around them. The firm made it through just fine. Carl's savings account did not. And that's not a side detail. That is the story. What followed were the so-called golden 20s, 1924 through 1929. American capital flooded into Germany under the Dawes Plan. Factories hummed again. Restaurants printed menus with prices that, miracle of miracles, stayed the same for an entire evening. Jazz on the Kurfürstendamm. Berlin became for a few shimmering years maybe the most electric city on the planet. Carl got promoted, got a real raise in stable money. He and Anna moved to a slightly bigger apartment. Friday nights at the cinema. She bought a dress, he bought a book. But they didn't rebuild their savings, not the old way. That particular faith, the belief that a number in a savings book was a fixed point, that it would sit there and wait for you like a loyal dog, that faith didn't come back. Carl kept some cash at home, opened a small foreign account after a colleague showed him how. He hadn't turned against Germany, hadn't become some radical. He was just a man who'd updated his understanding of how the world actually worked. And somewhere in the back of his mind, not as a political thought, but as something deeper, something physical, the kind of knowledge that lives in your bones rather than your brain, was the memory of a November morning, walking into a bank, handing over a savings book, walking out with almost nothing. That memory didn't dissolve in the golden 20s. It waited. 1929. The American loans dried up. Factories slowed down. Unemployment offices opened on McCarran Street, and the lines began forming. A witness who stood in those lines described them years later. The unemployed standing in every kind of weather, waiting for their turn. Years of misery having painted everyone the same shade of gray. Carl held on to his job through 1930, through 1931. He was careful. He'd learned to be careful in ways that went far beyond anything his father ever taught him. But around him, in the beer halls and on the street corners, and in the letters section of every newspaper, he could hear something. A sound. The sound that 800 marks reduced to nothing makes when it happens to enough people at the same time. Not a bang, not chaos, just a country full of careful, responsible people who had once believed in the system and quietly, completely, stopped. Trust the system, they said. The system had other plans. Most people will watch this and think it couldn't happen to them, that their savings are different, their currency is different, their institutions are more solid. That's exactly what Carl thought. That's exactly what Heinrich thought. If you'd rather see the pattern before it reaches your nightstand drawer, Money Never Learns is right here. Subscribe button's waiting. Unlike savings books, it'll still be worth something tomorrow.